Gastar y gastar y gastar.
Well, he's only gone and done it, hasn't he? The man with the Beatles haircut and the Motley Crue attitude to life is Argentina's new president. So, could El Loco be Argentina's salvation in the face of catastrophic levels of inflation? And could crypto play a part? Now, as a right-wing libertarian, Milei is often lauded as being pro-Bitcoin. But is this really the case? And if so, could he follow El Salvador's example and make BTC legal tender in South America's second largest economy? Or could he at least slash restrictions on access to BTC, which could in turn have profound consequences for its price? Well, let's find out, shall we? Okay, so first of all, who on God's green earth is Javier Milei? Well, perhaps most importantly, he's a trained economist with 2 master's degrees in economics. He worked as the chief economist at one of Argentina's largest business conglomerates, as well as at HSBC. And he's written books and publications outlining his economic vision. Here's a passage outlining his libertarian views. Quote, "When it is made clear that the correction of market failures by the government, as proposed in the neoclassical paradigm, is conceptually invalid, etc., 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 there will no longer be any reason for government intervention, which will not only stop the socialist advance, but will also allow us to counterattack. In other words, shrink the state and cut left-wing policies like social welfare." Now, while you may disagree with his views and perhaps be distracted by his wild antics, which I'll get to in a second, the man does have some economic pedigree. And this is important to note when you hear of lazy comparisons made between him and other right-wing populists like Donald Trump and Brazil's Jair Bolsonaro. They might share a style, but they differ in substance as well as vision. Trump, for instance, is a protectionist. He imposed tariffs on countries like China, Mexico, and Canada, and told manufacturers where to place their plants. Milei couldn't care less about protectionism. What he does care about is sensationalism, and this is where the populists align. For the sake of context, and let's face it, entertainment, here are a few of Milei's special mentions. He's waved a chainsaw around at rallies as a symbol of his determination to chop down the bloated state and what he calls, quote, the political caste. He's beaten a piñata in the shape of the central bank into smithereens to show his disdain for Argentina's money-printing institution. He's rocked out on stage, dressed up as his own superhero, and has said people should be allowed to sell their own organs. And he's insulted everyone from feminists to Pope Francis. That's right, he's called the head of the Catholic Church, a fellow Argentine, a, quote, imbecile and, quote, the representative of malignants on earth. Dios mío. And Milei also has a more, shall we say, quirky side, which the media duly laps up. He's named 4 of his beloved dogs after famous economists, including Milton Friedman. A 5th is called Conan, after Conan the Barbarian, which does seem apt. He calls himself a, quote, lion and was once a tantric sex coach, but I think the less said about that, the better. Now, before explaining his position on crypto and what impact that could have on Argentina, I should first explain how this man, so steeped in controversy, became Argentina's president. After all, until recently, no political expert worth their salt thought Milei had any real chance. Well, to borrow a phrase from James Carville, Bill Clinton's one-time political strategist, quote, it's the economy, stupid. Possibly no other country in history has quite the same levels of unmet potential as Argentina. At the turn of the 19th century, it had one of the largest economies in the world. But since the 1930s, Argentina's economy has suffered continuous cycles of boom and bust. It ended the 20th century with a GDP half that of Italy's. And in the past 2 decades, things have gotten worse. Much worse. Today, Argentina is experiencing crazy levels of hyperinflation at around 140%, among the highest in the world. 2 out of 5 Argentines now live in poverty. In 4 years, Argentina's currency, the peso, has lost 90% of its value. Imagine that for a second. In practical terms, it means prices are changing by the week. It means that menu prices are written on stickers so they can be regularly updated. It also means that money exchange shops are commonplace, so people can quickly convert their earnings into US dollars or other currencies that can better hold their value. But many of these stores are illegal since there are tight restrictions in the country against buying foreign currencies. So, in this context, it's not hard to see why Argentines have had enough. Years of economic mismanagement have gutted the country's economy. They want a complete shake-up, and this is exactly what Milei has promised. Milei proposes economic shock therapy, of which there are 3 key aspects. The first is to shut down the central bank. He hates it. He calls it a, quote, scam and a tool used by politicians to cheat the public with inflationary tax. He's pledged to remove it before lowering taxes. The second aspect involves huge spending cuts. His plan includes abolishing 11 of Argentina's 19 ministries. And not only that, he wants to cut GDP spending by 15% and massively slash welfare payments. However, this comes with very high risk. Opponents argue that such drastic measures could disproportionately impact vulnerable communities. 40% of Argentines, I should remind you, are living in poverty. In such an atmosphere, critics fear that these cuts could cause social unrest, especially given how powerful the country's labour unions and social groups are. Many are in agreement that Argentina needs to slash its spending, but not everyone believes its people can really stomach such a forced diet. Now, the third key aspect of this shock therapy is to replace the peso with the US dollar. This dollarization strategy is not a new idea. It's been implemented in places like El Salvador, Zimbabwe, Panama, and Ecuador, as well as a few island nations. Now, Ecuador is the particularly interesting example here, as it's the one Milei often cites as inspiration for his vision. In 2000, after facing similar inflation and poverty levels to current-day Argentina, Ecuador dollarized. This brought inflation levels down from 96% in 2000 to 8% 3 years later. Ecuador's economy is not perfect, but it's a sure sight better than it was before dollarization. And if, like Milei seems to be, you are squarely focused on combating inflation, dollarizing the economy is an effective way to go. However, as many economic experts have warned, dollarization comes with enormous risks. For one, if it is implemented, it will mean that Argentina has greatly reduced control over trade terms and monetary policy. This means it will be particularly vulnerable to external shocks like oil price changes and global conflicts. It will, in fact, be subject to the whims of the US Federal Reserve. Some critics are saying that Milei's talk of dollarization is unfeasible. Argentina has minimal US dollar reserves and is not in a great position to secure funds from global capital markets. Sure, it could potentially get a loan from the International Monetary Fund, but this won't be straightforward. Argentina is already the largest debtor to the IMF, with dues in excess of $40 billion. That is a staggering bill to have to pay, and is one of the many pressing issues on Milei's plate. While the loan can be renegotiated, presumably the IMF will want Milei's new government to come up with a credible repayment plan before it would consider revising the terms. But while the naysayers, at least in the West, seem to be the loudest, some notable economists are hailing Milei's vision as brilliant. Steve Hanke, professor of applied economics at Johns Hopkins University, is one of Milei's more vocal supporters. In a recent discussion, which I'll leave a link to below, Steve claimed that, quote, "The supply of dollars in Argentina is massive. It's $265 billion in cash notes, which makes it the country with the highest number of circulating dollars outside of the United States itself. Yes, Argentines have such little trust in their own currency that they're hodling, if you will, the equivalent of the GDP of Kenya. This phenomenon, Steve says, disproves the argument that it's unfeasible to implement dollarization. The dollars are already in circulation. Hypothetically, if Argentina under Milei does adopt the US dollar as its legal tender, its impact could reverberate internationally. Let's look at one plausible scenario. If Steve's figures on the amount of US dollars in circulation in Argentina are correct, and the country does dollarize, this could lead to a much-needed influx of money back into its banking system. In response, Argentine financial institutions, along with the government, may then opt to invest a substantial portion of this capital in US government debt, adding it to their balance sheets. Such a large-scale acquisition of US government bonds could potentially drive down long-term interest rates in the United States. In turn, if these interest rates were to fall, it could act as a catalyst for a rally in the US stock market, as lower interest rates often make stocks more attractive to investors. It's the butterfly effect. Hold up a second there, Guy. Sorry to interrupt, folks, but I just wanted to very quickly tell you about the Coin Bureau Deals page. Now, this is the place where we have put together some of the very best deals and promos in all of crypto. So you can think things like exchange sign-up bonuses, trading fee discounts, and money off of hardware wallets, and much, much more besides. So if you want to check that out, coinbureau.com/deals is the place to go, or you can just use the link in the description of this video down below. Thanks very much, and now back to you, Guy. So now that the broader macroeconomic picture is clearer, let's delve into Milei's stance on crypto. One question many are posing is whether Milei's election could lead to BTC being adopted in Argentina as a legal tender. As you'll remember, El Salvador was the first country to do this in 2021. The president, Nayib Bukele, claimed it would boost the country's economy, promote foreign investment, and also facilitate remittances, which account for a whopping 25% of El Salvador's GDP. How has this gone? Well, to date, it's fair to say that it has had mixed results. Let's examine this more closely. According to official figures from last year, just 20% of Salvadoran businesses accepted payment in BTC, and only 14% of businesses in El Salvador had carried out transactions in the asset between September 2021 and July 2022. In the same period, just 2% of remittance payments had been made in BTC. In short, adoption and public confidence in BTC is low in El Salvador. However, when you dig into the reasons for this, it's clear that they might not necessarily apply to Argentina. Bukele arguably tried to roll out his vision for BTC in El Salvador too quickly. El Chivo, which is a wallet backed by the government to onboard new users, was criticized for being glitchy. Very glitchy. Now, theoretically, the idea was great. New users were encouraged to join with $30 sign-up bonuses. It aimed to seamlessly connect with the banking system of El Salvador so that people could deposit or withdraw dollars from the platform, and it does not charge commission for remittances. But because the tech wasn't up to scratch, adoption suffered. Now, the Chivo wallet has just 3.1 stars on the Google Play Store with over 30,000 reviews. Would you download that app? Unlikely. Then you have market dynamics. For most of the period since BTC was adopted as legal tender in El Salvador, crypto has been in a bear market. It's not easy to onboard new people at the best of times, but when there's endless FUD flying around, the challenge becomes monumental. What also hasn't helped is the fact that Bukele has been pretty quiet about BTC in the last year or so. We don't know how much BTC El Salvador really has, but we can muster a guess based on Bukele's tweets. According to estimates by CoinDesk, if the country bought 1 BTC a day as part of the dollar-cost averaging strategy the president outlined in November 2022, its BTC holdings would still be in the red. However, this could all be turned on its head when we enter a bull market as FUD turns to FOMO. The third factor to consider when assessing the performance of making BTC legal tender in El Salvador is education. Numerous reports indicate that there is still a lot of misinformation around BTC and crypto in general in El Salvador. When combined with a poor market and poor tech, it's perhaps not surprising that most Salvadorans have sought the safe haven of cash over crypto, for now at least. I suspect we'll see crypto pick up in El Salvador when we fully enter a bull market. But now, back to Argentina. One thing that distinguishes the two countries is that crypto adoption in Argentina is among the highest in the world. Just as most people quickly convert their salaries into US dollars to prevent the devaluation of their earnings, others convert their salaries into US dollar-pegged stablecoins like USDT and USDC. And some, of course, invest in other crypto assets. How many Argentines hold crypto? Well, that is hard to say. A report by Reuters earlier this year put it at 23%. However, a local crypto source quoted by Chainalysis put it at around 11%. Regardless of the number you go with, it is very high in relative terms. For context, in the US, the figure is around 17%. All of which is to say that Argentina is a far more fertile environment for crypto adoption. But while the seeds of growth are there, will Milei be able to successfully cultivate them? Well, the short answer is, it's unclear. Bitcoin certainly responded positively to his election, with the price of BTC pumping to $37,000 on the news. And Milei openly approves of Bitcoin. In media discussions, he's called it a tool that helps shift monetary control back from the central bank to the private sector. Not only that, but he also views it as a welcome alternative to conventional assets like gold or silver. But while Milei is certainly pro-Bitcoin, it's not a central component of his platform, not by a long shot. In fact, some critics say Milei has only talked about Bitcoin to pander to younger, more tech-savvy voters. Others cite his involvement in hyping alleged crypto Ponzi, CoinX, which is accused of swiping $300,000 from users, as proof that he doesn't know much about the sector. For all of these reasons, it's highly unlikely that Argentina will follow El Salvador's example. BTC will not become legal tender, at least in the foreseeable future. That said, some commentators are hopeful that Milei's election will, quote, supercharge crypto adoption in the country. Samson Moe, a key player in nation-state Bitcoin adoption, has noted that while the deal Argentina made with the IMF last year for a $45 billion loan included a stipulation that Argentine banks wouldn't deal with crypto, this might become redundant if Milei abolishes the central bank. And this, Samson says, could result in Argentines adopting BTC as legal tender. Given the country's high adoption rates, this in turn could drive the price of BTC upwards. But while Milei may be good for BTC's price, is he good for crypto? As CoinDesk's Noel Aitchison warned in a recent piece entitled, quote, Argentina's Election, What Bitcoiners Are Getting Wrong, Milei's rhetoric around individual freedom may strike a chord with many in crypto, but he is emphatically not pro-freedom when it comes to social policies. He believes sex education is a Marxist plot to dismantle families. He opposes feminist policies and wants to ban abortion. He rejects the notion that humans have contributed to climate change and wants to loosen gun control laws. He's also downplayed atrocities committed during Argentina's brutal military dictatorship between 1976 and 1983, and has proposed shuttering a museum dedicated to its many victims. And these are just some of the hardline policy views Milei holds. So, even if he were avowedly pro-crypto, something the jury is still out on, ask yourself this: is this the man you want people to associate with the crypto industry? I, for one, think there may be better figureheads out there. Okay, that's about it from me, but what about you? Do you live in Argentina? What do you think of Javier Milei's election? And what do you think his victory could mean for crypto? Let us know in the comments below. Now, before you go, if you enjoyed this video and learned something from it, please like it, share it, and make sure you subscribe to both Coin Bureau and Coin Bureau Clips. Also, head on over to the Coin Bureau Deals page where you can find the best discount deals and finest crypto merch there is. It helps support our channel and lets us continue to provide you with the best crypto and macro content out there. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Guy, and this is Goodbye.